Okay, we have some incredible teachings today, as usual, but the second piece is out of this world. Okay, so let's begin. Mea Baal Shem. Says the Heilige Baal Shem Tov, Malchus nikra dibur, va'amachshava v'kavana nikra Binah. Okay, so here we have to already have a little bit of hakdamas, introductions with regard to the Sefiros, which I've spoken about many times yesterday afternoon, right? In the Arsa Tshuva Shir, I spoke a lot about this. But just a very brief rundown, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself to the world in 10 different midos, right? These midos are not HaKadosh Baruch Hu, chas v'shalom. It's all the Kabbalah Sfarim will be printed in the beginning, a warning not to make this fundamental mistake, because it's the biggest kfira in the world. Chas v'shalom say that the Sefiros are divine, right? Those that were against Kabbalah in the beginning said it's even worse than Christianity, because Christianity has 3 and you have 10. You know, it's like, and chas v'shalom, it's the craziest misunderstanding. Right? The Sefiros are not God. Kadosh Baruch Hu is echad, yachid, umiyuchad, ein sof, with all of the distancing from any aspect of limit and form and anything. Kadosh Baruch Hu is ein sof. In his revelation to the world and creating the world, Hashem reveals himself in different midos, in different dynamics, in different aspects and ways. These are 10 ways. It's like like a prism that the light shines on, and then many colors come. It's one thing, it's one light that contains the many colors and chooses to reveal itself using these 10 created vessels. These are called the 10 Sefiros. Now, all the 10 Sefiros, without getting to what they are now, it's not our topic, or just to get to this Nakuda, are in a certain Kabbalistic understanding fit into the 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is a bit challenging, right? Because there are only 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. There are 10 Sefiros, doesn't fit in evenly, right? And so the very basically the way that they fit in is that the tip of the Yud, what's called the Kutzai da Oisiyah, the little thorn on top of the Yud from which the Sefer begins to write the letter Yud, that is associated with the Sefira of Kesser. That's the first Sefira. The Yud itself is the Sefira of Chachma, the second Sefira. The first Hey is the Sefira of Binah. Then the Vav, Gematria 6, is the 6 Sefiros from Chesed down to Yesod. And then finally the last Hey is Malchus. And in this way, Yud Kei Vav Kei literally contains within it all of the Sefiros, as does, just by the way, the word Echad, right? Because when you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, right, this Echad is revealed in Aleph, Ches, and Dalet. The letter Dalid is always in the Zohar Kodesh a reference to the Midah of Malchus, which is less, right, or Dal, right? It's weak because it doesn't have any energy of its own. It's the ultimate Mekabel, like we've mentioned in Shirim before. Dalid is, you'll see in Tara Aleph also, at least in the way that I present it, is that Malchus is connected to Dalid, and that Tara is connected to Nun, but it's also the idea of Dalid, right, which in Aramaic is the word delace. Delace is Dalit. It's not Dalid. It's Dalit with a taf at the end. Delace means it does not have, right? The les la megarme klum, like the moon doesn't have any light of its own. It's just the recipient. That's it, right? It's just the mekabel, and that's the letter Dalid. Aleph, of course, is Kesser, right? It's the first. It's the first letter. Aleph is Alufa Shalom, the chief, the master of the world, and then Ches is the 8 Sefiros in between the first sphere and the last sphere, right? And so Echad is Mamish, Kesser, 8 Sefiros, and Malchus. And this gives you a deeper Havana into understanding that Hashem Echad means that everything is Echad, right? Because everything that we see in the world is just a manifest aspect of one of these 10 Sefiros, and in that sense, quite literally, Ein Oil Mavada, right? Everything is godliness. We were speaking about this, right? Also, I think that Hashem is not just all the way up there. Everything is infused with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's godliness through the system of the 10 Sefiros, and that's why the Sfarim, which we'll see as we go in the Chabur, but the Sfarim make it clear that without the system of Kabbalah, and again, it's not like Kabbalah, you have to be 40 years old, which is also something that needs to be clarified, what is allowed to be learned, what isn't allowed to be learned, and so on. But what's clear from all the Mekubalim, right, who actually know about Kabbalah, instead of those who sort of don't know anything and just make up stuff about it, the people who actually know, like the Mekubalim, make it very clear that without knowing these Shrashim, you cannot really understand Hashem's Achdus. Right? It's through this system that we begin to really understand unity. Because it isn't just that Hashem, again, is somewhere one in some other realm, but it's that literally everything that you see, whether it's fire and water, the most opposite things. So we're going to see in the next piece in Memches, Hashem, it's all Hashem. It's mamish all Hashem. Okay, so now, why are we mentioning this in terms of the 10 Sefiros fitting into the 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei? Because you'll notice an interesting thing. There are 4 letters. 2 of them are different from one another, right? The Yud and the Vav. 2 of them are the same, which is the Hey and the Hey. So if you were keeping track when we said that the 10 spheres fit into the 4, I'm not going to hurry you now, right? But the first Hey is Binah, right? Because the Kutzada is Yud, the top of the Yud is Kesser, the Yud is Chachma, and the Hey is Binah. And the final Hey is Malchus. Okay, so you have Binah and Malchus are represented by these 2 Heys, and it should be obvious that if they are both the letter Hey, then obviously there's a tzad shaveh, right? There's something similar between them because they're literally represented by the 2 Heys. And the depth of it is, without getting all the way into this, but just the depth is that what Binah is to the first category of the Sefiros, which is the 3 moichin, the first 3 are like in the head, that's why the head is separate from the rest of the body, right? Because Kesser is the skull, Chachma is the right brain, Binah is the left brain, and so what Binah is, right, the aspect of Shemayim, Yismucha Shemayim, right? The aspect of what Binah is to the first 3, Malchus is to the lower 7, right? Because Binah is the final of the first 3, Kesser, Chachma, Binah, and that's like the end of that category. So Binah is Mekabel, right? What Kesser and Chachma are delivering to it, so to speak. And Malchus is the final of the lower 7. So both of them are recipients. Binah is the first aspect of the feminine, right? It's the first sad small, without getting into that now. Malchus is the obviously feminine, right? And they have a very, very deep correlation. They have a very deep connection with one another. Now, in the Heilige Zohar Kadosh, based on Psukim, the Zohar Kadosh makes it clear that Binah is connected to the heart. You see in Pasach Eliyahu, one of the most fundamental parts of the Zohar, that some Nusach Sfard actually has a minhag, if you can, to say it every day. Say it, it's in the Siddur, it's printed as one of those tefillahs that you say before davening, like next to the tefillah of Rabbi Melech of Lezhensk, right? Tefillah Kodem HaTefillah, you'll see something called Pasach Eliyahu. Pasach Eliyahu is a hakdama to Tikkunei Zohar that was written by Eliyahu Navi, and it's part of the Zohar Kadosh. And it's basically the tamsis, it's basically the summary of most of the important yesodis of Kabbalah is in Pasach Eliyahu. It's very, very short, very dense, condensed, and like for example, the Ramak has in one of his essays just gives a pirush on the whole Pasach Eliyahu. And there are svarim that have been written, introductory svarim using Pasach Eliyahu as the Pesach, right, as the gateway into understanding some of the basic ideas of Kabbalah. So in there, you have 2 different aspects of explaining Binah and Malchus. One is relating to Binah. Binah is connected to the heart. And it's a pasuk that says, Halev Mavin, right? Or, Uvilevava Yavin, like we said yesterday, with his heart he will Yavin, Binah, Vishav, and do Tshuva. And we had a whole share yesterday, Shabbos afternoon, about the connection between Tshuva and Binah, which we've learned about also in the Likutei Moharan Chabur in the nighttime. Okay. Binah is connected to the heart. Malchus, says the Pasach Eliyahu, Malchus Peh. Malchus is associated with the mouth. And this is because, without getting into this whole thing now, again, it's a whole subject. The head, even though it's one aspect of the Sefiros, right, because it's just, let's say, Kesser, let's say with Chachma and Binah in it, but Biklalius, the head contains all 10 Sefiros. And those are the ears, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Without getting into the whole thing of it now, each head, even though again it's one part of a larger structure, because that's how the system of Kabbalah works, right? Every part contains all the other parts. As you go down the system, things get manifest more and more. But in this upper part, you have the 10 Sefiros, right? Obviously, the mouth being the lowest, right, and mamish at the bottom, is going to be Malchus, right? Malchus is connected to the peh, to the mouth. Why does the Kodesh Baruch Hu get so upset at Am Yisrael speaking through the Nabi Yeshayahu right before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash? Is because B'savasav Kibduni, right? They're honoring me with their lips, which is where the phrase lip service comes from that, right? Lip service, right? They're paying lip service. They're just saying the words, right? They're honoring me. They're saying the siddur. They're saying the right words. But v'libam richak mimenu, their heart is distant from me. Their heart is distant from me. So, al pi Kabbalah, this means that there's a separation between Binah and Malchus. There's a pirut, there's a separation between the Sefiros above, right, which is the heart, which is the intention and the kavanah, the motivation that goes into the thought process, beginning a creative process, wanting to create, big picture, chachma, and then thinking about, okay, how am I actually going to do it? And there's a separation between that and the actual doing of it, right, which is the speech in the standpoint of tefillah, there's a disconnect between the two. And that's what's called it's one aspect of what's referred to in the Sfarim, referring to Galus Mitzrayim, where you'll see that Dibur was in Galus, right? You'll find this idea, right? Dibur was exiled. One of the aspects is that Dibur is sent away from the Lev, right? Dibur is in exile. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the Goyal of Mitzrayim, can't speak, right? That's why Parai, right, is the letters, the Arizal Ha'oirif, which is the back of the neck, exactly opposite the mouth, where no speech comes out from, right? It's the same thing, it's the back of the neck, right? Opposite the place of the mouth. Ha'oirif is Parai, and many other Ramazim. Says the Degal. That's why the pasuk says when Am Yisrael are leaving Mitzrayim. I've said this before, so if you've heard this from me, it's good to review. Have you? You know what I'm about to say? The pasuk says, "Ulechol b'nei Yisrael layachartz kalav l'shaynai." Right, and for all the Jewish people, no dog was attacking them with their mouth, was barking essentially. Right, and that's why it's a skula to say that pasuk if a person's around dogs, whatever. Say this pasuk to ward them off, and the dogs were rewarded for this. He says the Degal based on everything basically we've just been saying, which is why it's very hard to learn Hasidus, because he doesn't give you the whole introduction. So you have to have the Hakdamas first, then you can learn. So he says, now that Am Yisrael was getting redeemed from Galus, which means that Dibur was going to be no longer in Galus, he says, read the pasuk the following: Ulechol b'nei Yisrael layachrats. Am Yisrael would no longer be attacked. Kelev l'shayna is kilev l'shayna. Because now the kelev is a dog. A kilev means that, like the heart was their lashon, right? Their dibur was aligned with their heart. Kilev l'shayna. Yeah. This is Pnimius Atayra. Start to see the code in the psukim. Right? Kilev l'shayna. Because now they were authentic again, right? And the whole thing of Mitzrayim was really to shake them into authenticity. Right? V'nitzak, Hashem was, like we said, trouble is to get you into prayer. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was trying to elicit tefillah from them. And now they were there. Kalev l'shayna. Okay, so fine. With that akdama, let's go back inside. So it says the Baal Shem Tov, Malchus nikra dibor. Now we understand, right? Malchus is called dibor, speech, v'hamachshava v'kavana. And now, right, because kavanas halev, right, kavana is the heart. Machshava and kavana are called Binah. V'kasher mechaber bein be'esek b'tayra oy b'tfila. Whether a person is davening or a person is learning, and we connect these two. Meaning we put our heart into it. We're not just, checking off the list mincha and you fly through it and you said the right words in the siddur. But your heart is in it, mamish, because that's what Hashem wants. Im kavana, right? Dahanu adibur im kavana. So then az mechaber mekasher malchus and Binah. So then you're connecting malchus and Binah. You're making a yichud. And here again, which we spoke about a little bit last night with the Chabura, this is where the Baal Shem Tov was mechadish, something that the Arizal wasn't. Because in the Ari, you'll just find these ideas, that there's in the Luft, in some heavenly place, there's a thing called Malchus and Binah, and you make Yichudim. Says the Baal Shem Tov, you are the Yichud, right? Heaven is in you, and you are it, right? And Binah and Malchus exist in as much as you have a heart and you have a mouth, and when you daven with Kavana, that's making a Yichud Chachma, Binah and Malchus. That's the Indian of the Gilui of the Torah of the Baal Shem that didn't exist earlier. Right? Umekasher Malchus Mabina beside, and this is the secret of the pasuk in Shir Hashir, Mi Zois Oilam and Abit Midbar. Right? Who is this that's elevating from the Midbar? And the Zohar Kodesh right in the beginning, in the Akdama to Bereshis, writes Mi Zois Oila, Mi Im Zois Oila. He adds the word im. What's Mi Im Zois Oila? So how many gates of Bina are there? 50. Right? So anytime you see the word Mi, which is Gematria 50, is a reference to Bina. Because Mi as 50 is 50 gates, right? Mi is always Bina, Yam is always Malchus, right? They're getting to that now. Zois is always a reference to Malchus. This is just code. Mi is Bina, right? The energy of Bina. Zois is Malchus. Why is Zois Malchus? No, not quite. When's the first time you see the word Zois in the Torah? In reference to whom? No, earlier. Chava. She was called Al Zois. She was called Isha Kimi Ish Lukacha Zois. Right? Because this one, which is a feminine way of saying this, right? Zeh is male, Zot is female, Zois. Anytime you see Zois, is a reference to Malchus. Zois is always Malchus, and that's why, for example, the Sfar Makdashim, based on the pasuk, it says, "Ki bezois yavi aron ala kodesh." I think we mentioned this, right? Where the Sefiros are a system. You're trying to get up into the system. There's only one way in, and that's Malchus. Ki bezois yavi aron ala kodesh. And Zois is a reference to Emunah. Zois is a reference to Tefillah. Zois is a reference to Anivos, Bittul. The only way in is Zois. Right? Is Zois.
Which is the Makabel, so that's the...
Right? Also aligns with this, right? Ki bezois yavi aron. Zois is always Malchus. Says the Zohar Kodesh, that's really what the pasuk is saying. Mi zois oila. Binah is elevated together with Malchus min ha-midbar. What's the midbar? Is medaber, right? Through speech. But speech that's really spoken properly with ru'usa deliba, with the willingness and the yearning and the shtokukos and the dveikos of a heart that's seeking its source, not just saying words off a page. Okay, so that's the Baal Shem's teaching, just 3 lines, but it's right, very, very deep, right? Mi im zois oila. That's really the depth, the Kabbalistic understanding of this pasuk. It's all code. Mi zois bina malchus oila are elevated together.
Why does Dibor have to be Binah and Malchus, not some other random series?
What's that?
Why does Dibor have to be?
So he said Malchus is peh, right? That collectively Malchus is associated with peh. There's depth to that as to why, because Malchus, I'll tell it to you quickly, Malchus is essentially the mitzamtzem, it's the constrictor, right? Malchus relates to our created world, right? Hence, God created the world with dibor, with speech, right? And the whole world is tzimtzum. Why? Because on the level of voice, any measure of voice, and I mentioned this again many times in Shirim, if a person says ah, right, that voice itself could, if filtered through 1 million different mouths, become any word in any language maybe ever in history. Right? Voice itself is completely unqualified. It's qualified from the standpoint of a measure. So in terms of how long your ah is or how short, you'll be able to make long words or short words. But fundamentally, that voice could be turned by mouths into millions of languages and millions of words. It's completely unqualified. That relates to the sphere of Tiferes, right? Or like a transcendent godliness that is not formed yet. It could make anything. Dibor is mitzamtzim. Once a person speaks a word, that voice just became that word, and that's what it is, right? And so that's why Yaakov Avinu, who in the Sefiros is the Midah of Tiferes, says Hakol Kol Yaakov, because Yaakov is all about the voice. Yaakov is the Midah of Tiferes, is the aspect of Kudsha Brichu, just terminologies, but it's the aspect of the transcendent. That's why Yaakov is associated with voice. And who is Malchus? Which tzaddik is Malchus? David HaMelech. What's David HaMelech's whole thing? Words. Not only words. If Yaakov Avinu is Torah Shebiksav, which he is, right? Titan Emes Liyaakov and Asan Lanu Tairas Emes. Yaakov Avinu is Yoshev. I Halim. Yaakov Avinu is the Indian of Torah Shebiksav. And there are 5 books of Torah Shebiksav, relating, by the way, to the 5 elements of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Right, so the Kutzah, the Eis Yud, and then the Yud, and then the Hey, and then the Vav, and then the Hey. There's 5 aspects together, right? Because 4 letters, but the Yud is split into 2, so that's why everything's 5. Chamishe Chumshei Torah. David HaMelech writes 5 Sfarim of Tehillim. It's interesting, most people don't know. Tehillim is really split into 5 different Sfarim. Right? We don't really refer to them as such, we just say Tehillim, and it's not, which is interesting itself, why it hasn't come down in such a way where we're familiar with the different books, But there are 5 books of Tehillim, and the Medrash says they're connected to Chamishe Chumshei Torah. Right, because David is just channeling down Torah to say Torah in and of itself is mamish in the air. What do you do with Torah? There's mamish what we're learning, right? Turning Torah into Tefillah is exactly that, right? Is to take the Torah and to make it real, which means to daven it, because Hashem doesn't just need robots that are keeping the Torah. That's the whole thing of the Baal Shem Tov. Hashem wants you. He wants your heart. He wants you. That's the yin and the dibor. That's a full creation. That's also the aspect, not just tefillah and David, but in its own sense, Torah Shebiksav is Tiferes, Torah Sheba'al Peh is Malchus. The same thing, right? Torah Sheba'al Peh, because it relates to the mouth. So that's why, right, dibor is the aspect of Malchus, and speech. Okay, let's go a little weiter. So he says, V'chein kishaya echad loimed is a Mishnah. So he says, and this was true, that when a person learns a Mishnah, or something, learns something, the Baal Shem Tov would tell that person, the Baal Shem would be able to tell this person whatever would happen. Whatever was going to happen, he found it in learning. Because again, learning, if you do it right, connecting your kavana to the words, you open up all the channels. All the channels, and you're able to access the supernatural realm. We were speaking yesterday that 8 is one above 7. 7 is everything in nature. 1 above is 8, right? And that's the realm of Binah, which is the 8th Sefiros from the bottom, right? Malchus, and then Yesod, and then Hod, and Netzach, and Sefiros, and Gvura, and Chesed, and then 8 is Binah, right? That's the realm of supernatural. Again, that's why Hanukkah is 8 days, right? Because we're channeling the supernatural energy of Hanukkah. Bris Milah is on the 8th day. It enables us to overcome our nature. The Chule, right? 8 is beyond. And so the Baal Shem was able, and he says, like there was a story like this, and he doesn't say, it comes from Toldos Yaakov Yosef, doesn't say what the story is, but there are stories where the Baal Shem Tov was able to help people, if they learned properly. Again, they opened channels, and he was able to, to see things supernaturally through limud.
The way he said it is like just anyone.
Yeah, but Haya Omer Lai is the Baal Shem Tov. Haya. Right? Haya Omer Lai Masha Yilasid. Okay. Let's go further now. So really, we already looked at one part of this Mishnah last week, if you remember, right? But this is referring to the other part of the Mishnah that doesn't just say that Abraham Avinu was Noichel Chaya Olam Haba, right? And Bilam just got this world, and even this world he didn't get, he got Gehenim, right? That's what we learned last week. Over here is referring to the first part of the Mishnah, which says that Abraham Avinu's whole thing was shiftless, right, and sweetness, and whatever, I can't remember the exact lashon, and Bilam, essentially the whole thing was gaiva and arrogance and ego. So says the Baal Shem, the following question is a famous one. Ubir Mayrizal, and it's referring to the Baal Shem Tov, Kigam Talmidei Avram Avinu yesh lהם midah shel ruach kavaya. What do you mean? You're really saying that like every student of Avraham Avinu had the midah of shiftless, really? Like, Jews at all? It's like, is this true? Like, we all descend from Avraham Avinu and this is our midah? Like, what do you mean? And he says, if we're being honest, like, let's not generalize. Right? It's possible that a Talmud of Bilam, whatever that means, also has a shvela. So he says, he says, true. The thing is that one is using it for Gashmias, and one is using it for Ruchnias. Meaning, Perish, Talmidei Avram Avinu, sure, they could sometimes have an arrogance, but Al Yidei Ruach Kavaya, Vayigba Liba B'darkei Hashem, the Pasuk says in Divrei Yamim, right? They're using it in a proper way. There's a bechina. The Baal Shem Tov is very strong in this. You don't have to be a pushover. You could be strong, but in Avodas Hashem. You be proud, be confident. You know what you're about. You have a message for the world. That's not anivos and shiftless. That's okay. What Rabbi Nachman would call that azus kedusha. There's a holy confidence you're allowed to have. Lasas mitzvahs gedolos. You could do mitzvahs gedolos. You could finish shas. You could do the great things. That's vayikba libai. And ve'elu, but Bilam al yidei nefesh shvela. Sure, they may have had a nefesh shvela, but him shvelim be'enei atzmam. But that wasn't a healthy anivos. Right, that was a terrible anivos that it caused them to be shveilim be'enei atzma shalei lasas mitzvah, so they can't do anything. So we have to have both, right? Meaning we have to have an anava that's a proper anava, right? That doesn't hold us back, but that puts us in our place to help us recognize that there's so much more to grow. And then we have to have a healthy vayik balipai, right? That again isn't causing us chas v'shalom to push Hashem out of our lives because we think koich v'yitzim yadi. No, but also it means that a person has confidence to be able to do wonderful things. Okay, and one more teaching, again, like I said, it could be unrelated teachings, but they're all sort of included haphazardly. Structure wasn't the strong point of Hasidim always, so they just sort of hobbled all these teachings together. I don't know why. Sur me'rav asetayev, this is very famous from the Baal Shem. On a simple level, if you look at the Mefarshim, it means very simple. Sur me'ra, first, you work on removing yourself from ra, and then ma'asetayev. Then you can make taiv. Says the Baal Shem Tov, no. Pirish, sheyasa me'ra taiv. It means, sur me'ra, distance yourself from evil. How? Va'asei taiv, by turning evil into good. Right? Va'asei taiv doesn't mean do good. Right? Meaning like step 2. It's sur me'ra va'asei taiv. The Pasuk is telling us this is how you should interact with evil. You flip it. Right? And that's what the next piece is all about, which we'll learn currently. We'll try to do it as quickly as we can. Okay. Kesser Shem Tov Memches, Baal Shem Tov. This is absolutely beyond. Mamish beyond. Vayar Hashem kisar liros. It says by the burning bush, the sneh, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees kisar liros, right? That Moshe turns to look, to see, and Hashem says to him, Moshe, he calls his name from the sneh. Ki Moshe Rabbeinu Yareh. He says Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid. Shema Klipa. Maybe this is like Kishuf. Today we don't have to worry about this. But there was a thing called black magic. Like this was a real thing that people did. This was a thing that people could learn. It was a chachma, and Avshachayim has a whole chapter about it. There's a thing called kishuf in the world, right? Maybe there are still people that know how to do it, maybe not, But so Moshe Rabbeinu sees this wondrous thing, and there's a sneh that's on fire, but it isn't burning. It's not so obvious that this is a davar shebekadusha. Not so obvious. Ad sha'amar Moshe. But you see that he responded to the sneh when it was called Moshe, when his name was called. Az Amar, and then he said Hineni, which Rashi already in last week's parsha tells us is a lashon of Anivas and Zrizos and right, Avram Avinu, Hineni. Wow, what a word. Hineni, I'm here. I'm Amish here, I'm offering myself up. Hineni. Right? That's like the motto of a Jew, essentially. Right? It should be Hineni, I'm here to serve. So what's Pshat? The Indian. So he says we can explain it in the following way. Ki Moshe Shmai Kala Kala Olamais. Moshe Rabbeinu's name includes all the worlds, all the spiritual energies. And that's why he had a hard time understanding his name. What does this mean? He had a hard time understanding his name. The same way that the Shechina, which is a reference to the godliness that fills this world, right? That Shochen Ka, Shechina, right? Yud Kei Hashem is dwelling in the physical world. See, he says, what is this physical world? It contains lots of different things, lots of contrasting things, some good, some bad, right? There are some poisonous plants and there are some beautiful flowers, right? In the level of Tzemeach, there are some very precious jewels and there's some very ugly, ichi, mud and dirt or whatever, and so on and so on. This world is a mix of good and not so good, right? So he says, Kain Ois Mem Min Moshe. So the letter Mem of Moshe, Haraim is Lememe, right? Malchus, the Mem is for Malchus. Right? So Moshe's name, the first letter of which represents the Shechina, which is associated with the sphere of Malchus, like we already said, is this physical world that was created with speech and so on. It contains all different kinds of things, some positive, some negative. V'ais Shin, and the letter Shin of Moshe, Kol Haruchais. That's one level higher in the spiritual realm. V'ais Hey, and even higher, the letter Hey is Hanashamais, right? That's even higher. That is the level of the Neshamais. And again, all of these different layers contain good and not good, right? It's a plethora of different energies, contrasting energies. L'chach shmoi hukshalai. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu had a difficult time understanding his name, based on the Maimer Chazal that says 3 things were difficult for Moshe to understand that he had to be shown by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Menorah, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him the menorah. Shkalim, right? The shkalim of Eish, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed. And HaChaydesh Kazeh Re'eh V'Kadesh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to show Moshe Rabbeinu what the Levana was going to look like for Kiddush HaChaydesh. These 3 things, menorah, shkalim, HaChaydesh, says the Medrash or the Gemara, Kazintin Shtak Rosh Tevis Moshe. These 3 things were difficult for Moshe to understand. They're his name. Mem, Shin, Hey. Menorah is Mem, Shkalim is Shin, HaChaydesh is Hey. Aval be'emes, so he says, okay, that's what Chazal say. But it's deeper than this. It's not just that, it's a remez that Moshe is like my high. Why? It's just happens to be that these 3 things, Menorah, Shkalim, and HaChaydesh, that he has a difficult time understanding, happen to be Rosh Hashanah Moshe. It's like a cute remez. Says the Baal Shem, no, it's much deeper. It's that these 3 letters that we already said aren't just a remiss to Menorah, Shkalim, and HaChaydesh, but relate to all layers of existence. That was Huksha Moshe. Meaning, if Moshe was Huksha, if it was difficult for Moshe to understand Menorah, Shkalim, and HaChaydesh, that's only because his name Be'etzem was difficult for him to understand. Meaning, this aspect of how it is that all the different layers contain good and also evil. Hayitach, and then all that comes from the Echad, Yachad, and Miyuchad. Right, and that's also, he doesn't say it here, but if you look in the Mei Shilach and other Sfarim, this is really what it means that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to see Hashem's face. Because all he saw was the Achar. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him the Achar. He showed him the Kesser Shel Tefillin. This is very, very, very deep. The Kesser Shel Tefillin is what that means. But the panim, right? Moshe, this was difficult for Moshe. That's what the Gemara tells us. Moshe found it difficult to understand. Tzaddik v'raloi v'rasha v'toivla is this. Right? So he doesn't bring those sources, but it's overt in Nigla that this was Moshe had a hard time with, right? It's a Gemara in Brachas. Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand. How could it be that you have Rishayim that bad things happen, that good things happen to, and Tzaddikim and bad things happen to? Which is this question. His name was Hikshalai, Moshe, Menorah, Shkalim, and HaChaydesh. Abel be'emes, again, Shmai atzmei Hikshalai. Shmai Kol minei toiv v'ra, right? How could it be that there's good and evil when it all comes from Hashem? Right, which is really Hashem's presence. So how could it be that this world is replete with duality? Right, how could that be? Moshe, again, his name, right? So how could the expression of oneness come from Moshe Rabbeinu, whose name is a reference to all these different levels that contain all these different mixtures? And that's why the Gemara in Bechayr says it's brought up as a question, a challenge that a certain officer, his name I'm forgetting now, was asking to one of the Tanaim, and basically he said that if you follow the cheshbon of the money that was collected from the Mishkan, not all of it was used, and Moshe Rabchem kubustus, right? Moshe was like a gambler. He was a thief essentially, right? And that's why Adrab, the Gemara answers, no, he wore a chaluk lavan that had no cuffs, that had no hems, so you couldn't slip any money. There was no pockets or anything. I mean, he wore a chaluk lavan. The whole thing was chalak. The whole thing was just made out of one piece of cloth. Adrab, and the Gemara goes that no, you're making a cheshbon wrong. You don't understand the value of what a mana was back then. V'chule v'chayna. But the point is that Moshe Rabbeinu contained some shemets of kubustus, right? That even though he wasn't, but still it looked to some people, right? And that was the challenge, that Moshe is stealing all the money. The Isha Kushis, right? The whole thing with Miriam, that people said, Ashes Ish, right? There was some aspect of Moshe that contained both, right? If you something similar. David and Basheva, the Mei Shilach. I don't have time. We're already over time. I just want to finish the piece. But the Mei Shilach says that Adarabba, the thing that you are holiest in, people will misinterpret and say Adarabba, that's the thing that you are failing at. But if you look in the Sefiros Yisrael, the very last, is it the very last? I think it's the very last Sefiros Yisrael in Mishnayos. It's the very, very. You know what? No, I'm not sure now. Maybe on the last Mishnah in Kedushin, I think. It's a famous piece, a very controversial piece from the Sefiros Yisrael. Some people cut it out of the Mishnah. It's very, very controversial. It's not the only controversial thing the Sefiros Yisrael said. It's a very interesting Mefarish. But over there, he says that a whole story about how a king, wanted to commission a picture of Moshe Rabbeinu's face, the whole thing, and he went and he brought him the picture, and he looked at it because he wanted to understand the tchuna of this person, and he says, it can't be Moshe Rabbeinu, this person has all the worst midas in the world, right? And then he says, I have to go see him myself, and that was Moshe. And he says, what's going on? And Moshe says, no, I was born with all the bad midas, which is connected the Chazal that says that in the Smala Bais Kula Ira, right, he was born mahal, the whole thing was full of light. So it's a little bit difficult to understand that, but Moshe says, Adrab, and I worked on myself. The problem is that they say the same exact story about Napoleon or Alexander the Great, I think. So, meaning, okay. But anyway, the point is that Moshe Rabbeinu contained all of these different aspects. Emes, Ein Shaila. But he says, no, there's no question here. Because the truth is, and this is the sum total of the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, we've seen this numerous times already. Ki hara hu kisei alatoi. It's not a Shaila. There is no Ra. According to the Baal Shem Tov, evil is just the lowest form of good. There is nothing outside of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's here for some reason to serve the good. It's a kisei for the Tov. Kamai, like the Pasuk says, Pari Hikriv, and Chazal say, what is Pari Hikriv? Doesn't just mean that Pari and his army were growing close to Am Yisrael. No, Pari and his army brought Am Yisrael close to Hashem. Pari Hikriv, like we said before, right? Vanitzak, Kelev L'Shainam, right? That the whole thing Mitzrayim helped that the Yidden should mamish be authentic. Right, or when a person sees Nebuch, how lives can fail so miserably and the suffering that these people have because they're Rishaim, it gives the tzaddik pleasure to know, wow, what a privilege, and I'm zoche, oh, what a privilege, right? I'm zoche to be connected to Hashem. And that brings him pleasure. And this brings tainug al yidei hara, dafka through the evil. And in this sense, so Ra has a place, because it's not Ra. Ra is serving Tov. And then when you fix up the Ra, so then you release the sparks of Kedusha that were there, and the Ra falls away. The Chen Machshava Ra, same idea. Person has a negative thought, like we've learned, you channel it. It turbocharges. Remember our tefillah, when you have a negative thought, who kisei al derech hanal, the same idea.
The Ra that we're talking about is like a Yid doing an Avera, or it's like what Hamas did on October 7th?
Every single aspect of Ra.
So how do you answer that up? How do you say that? Like, what happened on October 7th is just a kisei for the Tov?
Yeah, because in our reality, currently, we can't really live that way. Right, and that's what the Gemara in Bracha says, La'asad lavai, right, Yi Hashem echad u'shmai echad. The Gemara says, Ha'idna lavu echad, well, God is only one then, he's not one now, which is this thing, one, right? Meaning one, toiv and ra, everything. So the Gemara says, no, Ha'idna, in today's world, which we're getting closer and closer to the end, but in today's world, on good things you make a baruch atayv ametiv, on bad things you make a baruch dan emes, right? Because even though it's true that Hashem is echad, that's not revealed yet, and we're humans, we cannot live on that level. Even on the bad, we're going to look back and make a baruch atayv ametiv. So the Baal Shem Tov came a little bit to start to give us a taste of that reality, but of course we don't live that way. And of course there's still evil in the world that we have to battle to wipe out. But it helps when you know somewhere deep down, which is called Amunah, that really, like we said, absolutely. That's Baruch Hamad. Excellent. That's the Hasag of Baruch Hamad. That's the Hasag of Nahapachu, right? Which is the whole story of the Megillah. That Adarabba, it was not just not harmful for Am Yisrael, but it was the greatest benefit. Which, by the way, in a certain sense, even though it was very different back then, not very different back then. Keep in mind, although the Gezerah of Purim didn't happen, there were terrible things still that were happening to Am Yisrael. You know, Esther being in Achashverosh's palace is a tragedy of tragedies. You know, it's not as if nothing happened. It was just things happened. Okay, not that happened, but things happened. You know, again, it's impossible to take away, but I've mentioned this. If you look at Israel's position in the world vis-a-vis its enemies, post October 7th in the last year, I saw a news report. I didn't actually look at this, but they say Khamenei is very sick. Is that a real thing? I don't know. You never know today. You never know what you read, whether it's true or not. You know, even if you see a thing, you don't know if it's true at this point. You don't know anything. So, you know, but you look at what they did to Hezbollah. You look at what they did to Hamas. You look at Donald Trump in the White House, which never would have happened without October 7th because they lost the whole Arab vote, right? The Democrats essentially, and essentially Biden's weakness over that. And Adarabba, October 7th wouldn't have happened if Trump had won in 2020, which maybe he did or maybe he didn't. But if he would have won in 2020, then October 7th might not have happened because October 7th happened because Afghanistan happened and because Russia went into Ukraine and because everyone saw that America is a paper tiger and they have no control, they have no power. So a little bit you start looking back and you say, okay, what happened was the greatest tragedy in the world and it remains so. But you start to see things with the clarity of retrospect. And the story becomes a little bit longer, broader, deeper, more complicated. And then La'asad Lavai is the gilui of looking back to say, like, oh my gosh, these are not just Sefiros. Like, this is exactly why things needed to happen the way that they happened on the level, not just of the klal or the world, but on the individual. Because we don't know about neshamas and gugulim and tikkunim, and we don't know anything, you know? So the Baal Shem Tov wanted a little bit to give us a taste of that Ar of Mashiach. Do we live that way? No, if someone dies, it's a tragedy, you sit Shiva, you know? You see, but it gives you the fortification of emunah to know that this is the real reality. Right now we're not privy to it. One day we will be privy to it. You know, and so these two things can be true at once. Okay, we have to finish because just finishing. Right, right. So when it said Moshe pam achas, he didn't say hineni. He didn't say Moshe and he said hineni. Moshe, no. Because again, Eich Nasa Yichud. How could it be that there's going to be a revelation of Achdus through me? Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings the fire of His presence down into the sneh, that's the revelation of the greatest madrigas of spirituality. My time the sneh is the evil. So why isn't it burning up? Why isn't the sneh being destroyed? Ad sha'amalei pam beis, Moshe. Shenas al yidei ze yichud v'chibur v'kishur madriga tachtoina be'elyona ki yadua. Anytime that HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls out two names, right? Noach letata, Noach le'ela. There's a Noach below, there's a Noach above, right? There's the place of ruchnius that's in the world of Elokus, and there's the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu below in the world of Tavera. Moshe means that the same way that the sneh is not burning up because it is a kisei for the flame, your lower name, Moshe, which is Menorah, Shkalim, HaChodesh, which is that realm of all the duality, is a kisei for the Moshe Ilah. And then he saw that and he said, Hineni. He said, I'm here. I'm ready to reveal Yichud by HaKadosh Baruch Hu bringing the Malchus and revealing his Gevura, right? Yemincha Hashem nedar b'koyach, Yemincha Hashem tiratz oyev. That's a strange thing. What Yemincha? Yemin is chesed, tiratz oyev is Gevura. It's Achdos. The whole thing is Achdos. It's a very amazing piece. So if we have more time to be misplaining on it more, how every element aligns, right? Sar Lirais, he sees the snet itself, the thorn bush, Moshe himself, his name, all the other Mamar Chazal. It's very, very beautiful and deep. And again, so we should be Hineni people. We should be showing up with Hineni and recognizing there's so much more to life than meets the eye. We're here on a mission. You have the confidence of Avram Avinu and the anivus of Avram Avinu, and ultimately going back to the first piece, to be able to make a kesher between Binah, Malchus, Dibur, Kavana, and in doing that we open up all the doorways and the gates of Shefa to flow down, Be'ezus Hashem, into our lives as individuals and as a nation and as a world and as an existence and as everything. Be'ezus Hashem.
ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי, האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני נושם.